What the Cyclospora outbreak, falling restaurant sales, and the Tylenol crisis can teach us about customer behavior. Panera is down 7.5%. Chopped dropped 7.1%. Chipotle says the recent Cyclospora scare costed about 2 percentage points of sales during the second half of July. And Sweetgreen says concerns about the outbreak costed approximately 6 points of comparable sales. Those numbers become even more interesting when you look at what actually happened. The FDA linked the Cyclospora outbreak to shredded iceberg lettuce from central Mexico, supplied by Taylor Farms de Mexico. Neither Chipotle nor Sweetgreen was implicated in the outbreak, and Sweetgreen says it doesn't even serve iceberg lettuce. But apparently, that distinction hasn't made much difference to their customers. Which makes sense when you think about it, because most of us don't know very much about the relative health risks of iceberg lettuce, romaine, butter lettuce, or even kale, cabbage, or arugula for that matter. We don't know which farms supplied which restaurant chains, where their produce was grown, or how their respective supply chains work. What we do know is that we've heard the words lettuce and explosive diarrhea in the same sentence. And that's probably enough to make most people order something else. But first, a story. In 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area died after taking extra-strength Tylenol capsules that had been laced with cyanide. Johnson & Johnson responded by recalling approximately 31 million bottles of Tylenol capsules from stores across the country. They didn't just remove their product from the shelves in neighborhoods where the contamination occurred. They removed all of them, an unprecedented action that reportedly cost the company more than $100 million. The decision became one of the most famous examples of crisis management in American business because Johnson & Johnson understood that the issue they needed to solve was bigger than the poisoned capsules. They needed to make people feel safe taking Tylenol again. The company eventually reintroduced the product in new tamper-resistant packaging, including glued boxes, plastic seals around the bottlenecks, and foil seals over the openings. Which brings me back to your lunch, because what customers believe matters. The news media is full of stories about how badly the lettuce scare has hurt a number of restaurant chains. I've heard company CEOs explain how their company doesn't buy contaminated lettuce, how they don't use the same type of lettuce involved in the outbreak, and that their lettuce doesn't come from Mexico in the first place. They've also talked about all the things they're considering to explain these facts to their customers. But ironically, explaining might be exactly the wrong thing to do. I've said for years that when you're explaining, you're losing. Why? Because explanations require people to care enough to pay attention, understand what you're telling them, believe you, and then use that information to reconsider something that they've already decided. That's a lot to ask of someone who's simply trying to decide where to grab a bite to eat. I believe that the first company to prosper will be the one to take a page from the Tylenol playbook and remove lettuce from their menus altogether. Make every restaurant a lettuce-free zone. Take lettuce off the sandwiches, 86 the salads. Remove every product that contains lettuce and announce that lettuce won't return until the company is confident it can guarantee the safety of its customers. Think about the message that sends, the signs in the restaurants, the social media posts, the interviews, and the news coverage. Think about what happens when a television reporter covering the Cyclospora crisis can point to the first national restaurant company willing to remove an entire category from its menu because its customers' safety matters more than its profits. And think about what happens when customers who've been avoiding restaurants suddenly have someplace they can go without wondering where the lettuce came from. There's a pioneer premium available to the first company willing to take the risk. But I don't think it'll be easy because corporate pushback will immediately start explaining why this idea simply won't work. They'll say salads are too profitable. Franchisees won't agree to it. Their operating systems aren't designed to make that kind of change. Their food lines can't be modified that quickly. Or removing an entire category would create all sorts of complications. Of course, I have to wonder how profitable those salads are when people aren't buying them to begin with. Not to mention how interested franchisees would be in protecting existing procedures while their restaurants are losing customers in droves. But more importantly, I wonder how long the opportunity will remain available. Because somebody in the restaurant business is going to figure this out. Somebody is going to understand that customers frightened by lettuce probably aren't waiting for a detailed explanation about agricultural sourcing, leafy vegetable varieties, Mexican growing regions, or food safety protocols. They're waiting to feel comfortable having lunch again. My father used to say, when opportunity knocks, you can't say come back later. This is when leadership matters most. Creating value sometimes requires recognizing that the rules have changed before everyone else does. Understanding what your customers are actually thinking and feeling, and finding the clearest possible way to respond. The opportunity usually belongs to whoever recognizes the changes first and moves quickly enough to do something about it. There's a pioneer premium in that, and it rarely waits for the next board meeting. Now, I know that your company probably isn't dealing with contaminated lettuce, but sooner or later, something will happen that changes the way your customers think about what you sell. Maybe a competitor changes the rules. Maybe technology disrupts your category. Maybe customer expectations shift. Maybe something happens in the marketplace that has absolutely nothing to do with you and still changes the way people feel about your business. When that happens, your customers probably won't spend much time studying the details. They'll decide what they believe based on the information they have, and they will act accordingly. Understanding what they believe, what they want, and what will make them feel comfortable choosing you is where your value gets created, reinforced, and preserved. And sometimes that requires doing something significant before you have the luxury of knowing exactly how everything is going to work out. These are the kinds of conversations I bring to leadership teams and keynote audiences around the world. What your customers are really buying, how organizations create value when circumstances change, and how leaders recognize opportunities while they still have time to act on them. If your organization is wrestling with changing customer behavior, disruption, uncertainty, or a marketplace that suddenly stopped responding the way it used to, invite me to bring this conversation to your next meeting or conference. Because somewhere, someone is probably facing the same problem you are. And the pioneer premium, the value of that, will belong to whoever figures out what customers actually want and does something about it first.